Thanks for joining us today on Straight from the Source with Haley Watts, and my guest today is Audrey Denney. Welcome, Audrey. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Haley.
So initially, I invited you to come speak about, I know you're running for California House of Representatives, or U.S. House of Representatives for California's District 1. And I want to talk all about that and your ambitions and goals, but I think we have to acknowledge the fact that this is, we had the stunning news this week that we lost our current representative. I mean, you've run against Doug LaMalfa twice, right, in the past? Mm-hmm. Tell me about your interactions with him.
Yeah, so I have to start by saying I'm so just deeply saddened, and my heart this week has been with Jill, his family, everyone who loved him, and everyone who's grieving, right, around the district. I've experienced devastating, sudden loss before, and I know how it's just earth-shattering for everyone involved in that. That transcends politics. I remember there was a moment, we ran against each other in 2018 and 2020, and there was a moment at a 2018 forum where Doug said, Audrey and I don't agree on much, but we agree on our shared love of the San Francisco Giants. And I've been thinking about that this whole week, and how in that moment he really showed, we can disagree on issues, but still recognize and honor each other's humanity. And for me, we can hold this sadness for a loss, we can hold compassion for his family, and we can hold the fact that we disagreed and fought tooth and nail on issues, and holding all of that together is our humanity. And he showed that to me in that moment.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. And gosh, I think that's something that we're seeing right now. Something that I observed just on a personal level is kind of a heartbreak over this loss of remembering that we're all humans, right? That you're a Democrat and that person is a Republican. It's no, we're all humans, and we have certain feelings, and we might vote a certain way politically. We might have a favorite sports fan. You might be vegan. I might be carnivore. But that doesn't define us.
I'm not a vegan.
No, I'm a vegetarian, but you saw my leather purse, right? And my husband's an avid hunter, so.
But those things don't define us.
Exactly.
And then it is our shared common humanity, and that's such was such the spirit of my first two campaigns, running, because I was a Democrat running at the time. It was a deep ruby red district, right? And my core belief has always been shaped from growing up in a Christian home to my human rights formation. My core belief has always been where everybody is equal in worth and rights and dignity. So from a religious lens, we're all God's children, to a human rights lens, that's just how the world is. And so for me, I see this division, and I've always wanted to be part of kind of the salve on the brokenness of our country, and help people come back together around we're going to disagree on how to get things done, but we're going to recognize people's humanity, and we're going to recognize that society is better if everyone has a roof over their head, food in their belly, and can go to the doctor, and so those are, thanks for bringing that up.
How do you think we do that, though, aside from maybe saying, okay, let's all take a break from social media for a year?
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's the neighbor-to-neighbor rebuilding community is how I'm always going to preach about doing that. So my very next door neighbor, I am sure she will watch this podcast. Big fan of yours, by the way.
Oh.
She and I could not agree. We don't agree on anything politically, right? She had her no on 50 sign in her yard. I had my yes on 50 sign on my yard, right? But she recently lost her husband. But I go over once a week and have a glass of wine with her, and we chit chat. And when I'm sick, she and her husband bring me dinner, and when I'm gone, she watches my cats. We have this beautiful neighborly community relationship where we really show up for each other and care, and that transcends politics and bickering. And I only know her because she lives next door to me, right? But I think that if we start with the people who are closest to us physically, and we can rebuild the American spirit of loving and caring for each other, in small pockets, and then those small things build up to societal change. Individual actions make societal change. And so I don't know, that's what comes to mind for me.
I love that. I was just talking to my mom actually this morning, because she's struggling with stuff that's going on, and you know, I'll listen to anybody, you know, from all sides of it, and just hear them out, because I see people in pain, and I'm not trying to win a battle or an argument. I just, okay, talk to me about how you're feeling. And I was just telling her that, like, why don't you get in, like, go on a commission in your city or something, or join like something where you can feel like you have some sort of power to make a change in a positive way, right? Because we're not all going to be able to be, you know, a congressional representative. For some of us, that's a big step. But we all can do something.
We really can, and whether it's it can be so individualized to what people's passions are, right? Like if your mom like really cares about the parks, right? Or if your mom, you know, wants to, you know, work with the immigrant community, or I'm on the board of the South Chico Community Assistance Center, which is a food pantry, totally like nonprofit, volunteer run, and we do distributions twice a month, you know, and so there's so many different ways that we can get involved to make our community and therefore our world better. And I happen to be taking this, you know, one political path that not many people take, but it is in service in my mind to make that positive change.
Let's talk about how you got there. So, I mean, I know you're from California. You're from a family of like, mostly grape growing, right?
Yeah, so we grew, I was actually born in Visalia, in the Central Valley. So my dad at the time had olives, citrus, table grapes. But when I was in '86, so when I was 2, he bought the piece of property that I grew up on primarily, which was in southern Monterey County. He was one of the first guys to plant wine grapes kind of in the Paso Robles region. So that was in the mid '80s. So I went to Paso Robles High School. But so we had, at its peak, I think the ranch was almost 3,000 acres. So there's about 1,000 acres planted to grapes. We ran 250 head of mama cows. And then we had Percheron draft horses. So we had like an 8-horse hitch of Percheron draft horses. And so
did they work?
They were show horses. So we'd do like the exhibition at the state fair when the Budweiser Clydesdales weren't there. We'd be there. I like to joke that I was a carny at the state fair for a couple summers. But so we did that, and then we lost the ranch in 2010. After kind of the economic downturn in 2008, we lost a lot of grape contracts, and like so many farmers, we were land rich and cash poor. And so, but my dad is still down in that area, still managing vineyards at 77. I mean, farmers don't retire, right? They just keep going. And my mom and my stepdad are in. They retired to Monterey proper. So.
What were some of the challenges for your family growing up in, you know, water has got to be a big issue in a drought-prone state? Yeah,
when we were growing up, we were on an aquifer that was fed by the Salinas River. So that wasn't a huge issue for us, but I would love to talk about water if you want to talk about water.
What is your...
Oh my gosh, thank God. And so we had a candidate forum last Sunday, and I only had like 90 seconds to answer my questions, and they asked me about water, and I was like, I'd like to spend 45 minutes discussing California water policy.
And can we discuss it in a way where we don't talk about...
We make it accessible.
Say GSA or sub-basin?
Yeah. Okay, so here's I'll bring out my ag teacher hat.
Yeah, perfect.
Right, okay, so water in California is considered a public trust, which means that it must be used according to state law and our Constitution for the benefit of all. So that's kind of the legal framework behind it. But when we think about how water policy actually works in real life, it's usually the people with the loudest voices and the most money who make the water policy decisions. And so the framework that I come from like a values-based framework, is water should serve all. It needs to serve agriculture, it needs to serve the environment, it needs to serve communities. We need to make sure our rural communities in Butte County aren't like running out of well water. It needs to serve everyone. And California water rights, as you alluded to, famously complicated. Fun fact for you, our oldest water rights date back to before California was a state. The Pueblo water rights were from when California was part of Mexico in the mid-1800s. So we have like
and
Pueblo,
some of them are still in effect?
Still in effect. So we've got Pueblo water rights, we have pre-1914, post-1914, and then as you mentioned, SGMA 2014, GSA, all of that stuff like makes water policy famously complex. As the member of Congress, I can't change California water policy, right? But one thing that's really important to think about is in the new California's first district is almost 42% federal land. It's 41.7% federal land. And so I view one of the roles of the member of Congress as really like the key federal land manager. Like, I'm the one like fighting for and working for resources to help manage that land. And when so much of that is federal forests, we know that right now, famously, our forests are in a state of disarray, overcrowded with too much biomass, too many little trees, not enough diversification, not fire resilient at all. And so like we need, when we do that forest restoration work, to pull out those extra fuels, do prescribed burns, restore those watersheds, we're actually making, I told you I was going to get out my ag teacher hat, we're actually making a healthy environment that will be able to capture more snowpack, get us more, recharge our groundwater, get us cleaner water that's beneficial for wildlife, ecosystems, farmers and ranchers, people. And so that's actually, as the member of Congress, will be the biggest lever that I can press to kind of prepare us for California's drought-prone water future. And so, and if anybody wants to talk about specifically how I want to do that, I would love that.
Yeah. I mean, are you on board with Sites Reservoir? That's something
Sites
that's big right now.
Sites is happening. Yeah. So there's no being on board with it. If I had all of the Sites Reservoir money and they put just Audrey in charge for a day, I would have made sites underground storage because of the evaporation that will happen in that area and the pumping it in and out. I would have also taken all of that, those $3 billion, some bazillion dollars, and put it into forest and land restoration that then we get local contractors to do all of that thinning and that work that needs to happen in our forests. Because Forest Service A doesn't have the budget or the manpower to do that. But if we can make it easier for like resource conservation districts, fire safe councils, other external entities to work with Forest Service to get the work done that we know needs to happen, then they hire out local contractors who live here, who are from here, who actually go and do that forestry work. And so then those guys get paid. That boosts our economy, right? It makes our forests healthier, more resilient, which protects us from fire, water, or kind of improves our water, as we talked about. And so that for me is just like, is so key, and doesn't require any new legislation. Because let's be honest, like, we have the least productive Congress ever, like in terms of bills.
Make something actually happen.
Yeah, in terms of like getting new legislation through. But that's literally just working with Forest Service to make it easier for them to partner with Butte RCD, right? Like, and Butte RCD, Butte Resource Conservation District, has like $31 million of PG&E settlement money that they're using some of it right now, to do a huge kind of landscape level restoration project in Lassen and Plumas National Forests. But because of that money, they were able to do like the planning to do a project like that, and like getting it through NEPA and all this stuff. Like, it takes a lot of money. So it takes like, I'm remembering 1.3 million, but that might not be totally accurate. But it takes a big chunk of money to get all the planning through to be able to do that. But then we have the plan, and then they have the money from the PG&E settlement to implement that. And so that's like, it's like a 20,000 acre project, which is huge across those two national forests, which will then feed directly into our watershed. And this is like our local RCD here in town. Like, anyway, so you get me talking about natural resource management, and I will not shut up all day. I will just go.
What they're doing there, though, I mean, you said that that's kind of clearing the forest for forest health, and how does that impact water? How do those go hand in hand?
Yeah. So, so imagine with me, if you will, let us go back to pre-colonial days. Our forests had like old growth. There was like 80 to 100 trees per acre. There was meadows, plenty of room for the snow to hit the soil, recharge the groundwater, happy little critters running around. And that had been managed for millennia by Native Americans with prescribed burning, right? Because our forests need fire to regenerate, to keep certain invasive species down. Some of our species of trees need fire, right? And so a healthy ecosystem has a bunch of different kinds of trees, different ages of trees, has a lot of open space so other trees can come out. And then what we've seen after 100 years of fire suppression policy and underinvestment from, and we could talk about the 1910 Big Burn Fire that shaped forest policy and Gifford Poncho and all this stuff, but that's way too in-depth. We'll do that on a different thing where we just talk about forests.
Sure.
Yeah, it'll be a different podcast. You and I can
like
host
it.
it together. Audrey talks about, anyway.
We'll do one on water,
we'll do
one on forest.
and we can just get weird.
I love it.
But so after like all of this fire suppression policy from the Forest Service from 100 years, we have these forests that are overgrown. Certain species have like totally taken over. And so now in some of our forests, we have 500 to 800 trees per acre, and they're all the same kind of tree, and they're all smashed in like this.
Right.
And so the snowpack will evaporate before it even hits the soil.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so. And then when a bark beetle comes in, like it's super. It can be super devastating because when there's not a diversity in the ecosystem, if a pest or a plague hits it, it'll take out the whole everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man.
Interesting.
I love talking about this. Thank you.
So let me ask you this.
Can you tell I'm having fun?
I mean, you have a lot of knowledge of how this all works. Let me ask you. Let's talk politics and how that plays into forest management, to water management.
For sure.
What we've had for decades now, our congressman has been a Republican congressman and fighting for forest health and also for water rights and water. Having. The message I've heard ever since I moved to Northern California from Southern California is LA stealing all our water. But anyways, what would you say that we've done well, and what would you like to do differently?
Yeah. First, like LA stealing our water, like let's just call a spade a spade. Los Angeles does not exist in its current form without the water from Northern California, right? Like 2/3 of the rain falls north of Sacramento.
Yeah.
And yet, like over the last 150 years, we've developed this massive and now aging water infrastructure to move water from Northern California to water to Southern California. And it's not always based on water being a public trust. Right? So like when we talk about like Westland's Water District in the San Joaquin Valley and like selling like agricultural producers being able to like when they have appropriative water rights, which is another nitty-gritty thing, it means that they can make money off of water transfers to a different irrigation district. And like, I mean, I'm not gonna pick a fight on not live TV with with this specific water district, but like they're not always known as like the best users of water, and they have a lot
of
the
big growers.
Yeah, the big growers in the west side of the San Joaquin Valley, which is now a desert because of our changing climate and their lack of groundwater, and so then we're subsidizing or we're selling them water with our water that then we're having rural communities in Butte County whose wells run dry, right? And so that's my big issue is like everybody needs it, but I don't want us to lose out in Northern California on our basic needs being met because somebody somewhere is trying to make a buck. And I'll tie everything that we talk about always back to like our political and economic systems being bought and paid for by corporations and everything working together to make corporations money while regular people pay the price. And I think water can definitely fall into that. But we've done well versus what we haven't, where I can see us improving. When I get elected, I want to sit on the Agriculture Committee and I want to sit on the Natural Resources Committee because that is obviously one of my passion areas and background. And I do believe that I bring a nuanced understanding of natural resources, but also the players at the table. And really, when I look forward and seeing myself governing, I see myself making space to have every different player at the table, and then hearing and deeply understanding all of their concerns and their background, and then finding the best solution forward for the people, right? And so when we talk about natural resource management, we need loggers, right? We need environmentalists, we need all the ologists, the wildlife biologists, and the archaeologists. We need everybody at the table, but we also need state government, right? And how do our federal forests, how do those boundaries intersect with state and private land, right? We need CAL FIRE, we need Forest Service, we need our community stakeholders, we need tribes. And that's why when I was talking about the RCD, what their process is so cool is because it does, in the planning process, it brings everyone together to make a plan for that section of the forest. And I can see that one level up just on governing. So on a slightly more macro level, like how do we look at the natural resource management of our whole area and say, what are the key issues? How do we bring these stakeholders together? And so I think the collaborative approach that I'll bring to leadership, I think is a unique value proposition that I think will be effective.
Okay. Okay, so let's change topics.
Change topics.
Completely.
Okay.
Let's talk about homelessness, right? That's something, and I know you might say it's a state issue, not a federal issue, right? But I think it's a nationwide problem.
It's a local issue, it's a state issue, it's a federal issue. And it's an issue, I mean, even really directly that I see through my volunteer work with the South Chico Community Assistance Center, right, is what we're seeing is not only some folks that are kind of chronically unhoused, but we're seeing more and more, working families that are living out of their cars. We're seeing people that are like right on the border of or borderline of getting evicted, and people who are trying so hard in this economy to make ends work, that have already had to let healthcare go, that are trying to pay rent. I mean, you're looking like statistically when you look at our area, a lot of people are paying 50 to 60% of what they bring in total for housing.
Oh yeah.
And like the economists, not economists, the economists say that should be for like a healthy income, that should be more like 30.
Okay.
So we're paying up to double, leaving so much little other disposable income for things like healthcare and groceries that are rising. And so I think from an affordable housing like angle, there's so many angles that we could take with the issue of unhoused people, but at least from a federal angle, like the lever that I can push, you'll always hear me talking about that, because like I don't want to see I don't want to make bold promises of all these things that I can't change, but I know specifically like what I can do as your member of Congress and how I'll do that. And one of those is on increasing the affordable housing stock. So when we think nationwide right now, we're short 7 million affordable housing stock for low-income residents. I think the number in California itself is like 1.5 to 2 million that we're low. And we know that I know in our part of the world, we need a lot more affordable housing. So there are a couple things that I can do without getting too nitty-gritty. The low-income housing tax credits are the number one tool for affordable housing developers that make it worth their while to build affordable housing. Now in California, affordable housing developers have to be working with also like a nonprofit partner. But the reason that they do it is because of those tax credits. And there is right now that there's a kind of a benchmark that they were trying to get in the One Big Beautiful bill that they didn't get in, that would make that from 15% to 20% of like the value. And so that's like a small like policy nuance thing that if we were able to press that lever, we create incentives for more affordable developers to actually do the work in this area.
Okay.
So that's one thing to think about. There's other things like through the USDA, the rural housing programs and like that have never been fully funded. And so people in rural America are always kind of getting the short end of the stick in terms of federal programs. Let's talk about education if we have time. But like in terms of federal programs actually being funded to the way that Congress said that it would be funded. Okay. So that would be another kind of lever that I could push there.
Why does that happen? Why, if there's a promise of funding but it doesn't come across, like what's the disconnect?
Because so Congress controls the purse strings, right? And every year they're pushing through like the appropriations bill, right? And there's like this much money and there's all of these things that are promised and nothing ever gets fully funded to the level that it's promised.
Okay.
If we take it back to like the back why that is, it's because we have a tax policy that gives away money to corporations and billionaires and the elite at the expense of working families.
Okay.
And so the budget is never going to balance if we keep giving massive tax breaks to corporations and billionaires. Right. And so if we actually taxed those people so that, Jeff Bezos was paying a similar tax rate to our teachers and our nurses and our firefighters, then we would very easily be able to fund like the entire congressional budget. But yeah, that's kind of a macro level.
So gosh, I am not an economist. No, I'm just kidding. Not an economist.
New word, yeah,
right?
me neither.
Yeah. At all. But I've always kind of like, we all have our thoughts of like, oh, well, if I was in charge, this is what I would do. I've heard an argument that always made sense to me, like a flat tax. Like everybody, you pay 15% of your paycheck or whatever. And that way there's no incentive. Like I hear concerns on both ways. Like if you were to, it's unfair that billionaires, there are all these loopholes and they pay less in taxes than people who make almost nothing.
Yeah.
But then, the idea that, well, people almost don't want to get into that higher tax bracket and make more money and be more successful because then they get taxed more because they're in a higher class.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember too that I don't think I think that we make that hypothetical in our mind and we think that that's a thing, but nobody's actually ever going to turn down a raise. And it's important to remember that it's based on your taxable income is only the part that's in that bracket, right? So if you were jumping from this tax bracket to this tax bracket, and this tax bracket, let's say 30%, not all of your income is taxed at 30%, just your income, your taxable income from here to here is taxed at 30%. Yeah. And so for most of us making less than $400,000 a year, which we certainly are, I mean, I don't want to judge you, but I'm assuming, like the nuance of tax policy at the scale that I'm talking about doesn't affect us at all. Yeah. I'm talking about making people who are bringing in $5 million a year to $1 bazillion a year. Like those are the people who we're not taxing, and corporations. We've brought the corporate tax rate to effectively nothing, right? And so that's kind of my approach to how we fully fund the federal government and like correct the deficit and like actually get a government that could eventually have balanced books. It's just I think we've talked before about how I grew up like on a family farm and like my family was Republican growing up, and like the conservative like value of like, I use air quotes because I think it's just a common sense value of like not spending more than you have in the bank. Like it just makes sense. And so I would love to be part of a generation of leadership in Congress that like sees that and then also sees the practical steps we need to do is by taxing the ultra wealthy.
So can I ask you about just the potential, because I hear this a lot, that, okay, you raise taxes on these big corporations that have so much money. Well, what if they just do it, in a different country, right? They outsource the work. Yeah. I mean, are those concerns?
Yeah, I think it's both, what if they outsource the work? And I think the other concern is like, what if they lower the wages on their people and then just give more profits to their shareholders? And like, I think none of those are hypothetical. Like, we've seen that happen with the 2017 tax cuts, with the One Big Beautiful Bill. Like, they're not using this extra money to all of a sudden pay their workers a living wage. They're using it to enrich their shareholders. And this, we are circling around and getting to like the crux of why our healthcare costs are doubling, why it costs 50 to 60% of our income to live in houses, why the middle class in America almost doesn't exist anymore. And this is exactly why, because we cannot just assume that corporations are good actors because they have proven over decades that they're bad actors working to just make their pocketbooks bigger. That's not obviously across the board. Some corporations like take care of their employees, but like when we look at a system level, like that's what's happening. And our political system that is funded by corporations making political or corporate PACs making political donations to representatives in that dark money circle. That's why they're like, Wall Street is actually helping write the regulations that regulate Wall Street. Like, Anthem Blue Cross is paying off members of Congress on both sides of the aisle with political contributions. And we can't expect system change that will actually hold corporations accountable until we elect people that don't take corporate PAC money. And so I think like you're really at the crux of the issue of like how do we actually protect workers? And at a system change level, like it is by electing people who will not be swayed by the corporations.
So this is such an interesting thing though, like how well do you even know yourself? Because something, just being a reporter, right? I always teach my new reporters when you come to the station, like you don't accept gifts. And I'm talking like basic stuff, like somebody might be doing a story about a break-in at a local bakery, right? And the shop owner is interviewed, and the shop owner, my reporter's a sweet, wonderful person. They do a great job. They're sensitive and compassionate. And the shop owner says, "Oh, can I give you a cookie or whatever?" Honestly, I would tell them no. You can't. You could buy the cookie if you'd like.
Support the local business.
Sure,
buy the cookie,
exactly. But it's just because corruption starts small, right? And it's just like, okay, well, I have some influence, and I could help you out, and it starts small. And I think that most of our members of Congress, most of our politicians or our leaders probably started with really good hearts and good intentions. They want to make positive change, but we are humans, and we are weak, and we want to provide for our families. And anyway, so I guess that's
power inherently corrupts, right? And so we have to put mechanisms in place to not let it do that. Like, we have to ban congressional stock trading, executive stock trading, their immediate families. Like, I just saw a chart yesterday, the day before, about like how members of Congress stock portfolios have increased in the last couple of years versus like the regular people. And it's, that's just, it's just blatant corruption. And like you said, like, it starts small. Like, most people who run for office because like some sort of public service calling, want to help others, right? But then you get there and things change. And so we need to put systems in place, like overturning Citizens United, banning stock trading, limiting presidential pardon power. We need to put these things in place that will act as guardrails on our democracy, to make sure that even like, that we're not relying on people's best intentions,
Right. So it's systemic. One thing, we need to make changes and safeguards to save people from themselves, essentially. For you on a personal level, like from a moral standpoint, do you have internal safeguards in place?
Yeah, absolutely. My biggest one is that I have never and I will never take a dime of corporate PAC money. And so, reminder, I ran in 2018 and 2020. Honestly, Haley, you remember, like, it was a seat no one thought I could win, right? Because there was a Republican.
That's Doug's seat.
That was Doug's seat. It had always been Doug's seat. And also, like, the registration advantage was, like, negative 10 points in my party favor, right? Like, but over those 3 years that I was running, I raised $3.5 million of campaign contributions with an average contribution size of $47. Mostly for like 80% or more were people who lived in our district. And so without a dime of corporate PAC money, right? And so what that showed me is that when you are willing to make a principled stand that says, I will not be bought and paid for, people will show up for you and people will believe in you even when the odds are stacked against you. And I would like to just take a moment to say, there are a couple Democrats running in this race, and one of them has taken money from Anthem Blue Cross, Amazon, PG&E, Facebook, Big Pharma, and that's not me. That's all I wanted to say. Carry on with your questions.
And all of this, the things that you just said, it's
publicly available. Powersearch.sos.ca.gov.
Okay.
That's for the state legislature. Anyone who's ever been in or run for the state legislature, you can type in those people's names, or if you're looking for federal, you can go to fec.gov, type in your member of Congress or the candidate's name, see everybody they've ever taken money from, and I encourage everyone to do that because I think who we take money from shows who we are accountable to, and I will only be accountable to people living here and people in this part of the world. So
okay,
that's my soapbox.
I like that.
I will get off my soapbox.
Look for those links and see if I can put them in the notes for this.
For sure.
So people can have access to that and do a little detective work of their own.
I love that.
Okay. Let's talk about other things that are really big for people. We have
healthcare,
education,
fire.
I was just going to say education or healthcare. Which one
wolves.
do you want to tackle first? Let's talk about wolves.
Which wolves first?
Yeah, sure. Where do you stand? That's
I have
so
thoughts.
controversial.
It's so important. Oh man. Okay, so I'm so glad you asked. So, like, the reintroduction of the gray wolf into California is like unarguably a win for conservationists, right? That's great. But I already told you I grew up on a cattle ranch, right? Like, I know what it means to lose livestock to wildlife. Like, a little graphic, but like I watched a coyote we don't need to get in that.
My
it's
mom
too
lost
graphic.
her dog to one, and chickens.
It's all we've seen it all, right? And so I know that feeling. But I also know that in the new district, Lassen and Plumas Sierra counties all affected by this, also Modoc, Siskiyou. But in 2021, we had 7 confirmed wolf kills of livestock in California.
2021.
2021.
Okay.
In 2025, last year, between January and October, we had 117. And so the scale of this problem, as you mentioned, is increasing because the reintroduction was so successful. On a federal level, or when a rancher loses an animal, they can get money from the USDA's Livestock Indemnification Program, but they get paid on the fair market value, not the replacement value, and only 75%. And so if you lose a mama cow, your fair market value is her going to beef, right? So you get 75% of what she would have basically been for hamburger.
Okay.
But what it takes to actually replace the cost of a breeding heifer or a mama cow is going to be significantly more than that.
Right.
So they're losing money, they're not getting compensated. It's really, really hard to document those kills, especially when you're out last in Sierra County. These ranches are huge, right? So it's hard to document them and prove that it was a wolf kill, and then get all that paperwork submitted. So you're always going to catch me talking both system change and nitty-gritty policy fixes that I think I can do in my first 2 years, and that's one of them is working to. Oh man, I almost made a pun and intentionally beef up the livestock indemnification program, right? But another really easy one to put in there. So Title VI of the Farm Bill is conservation. One of the programs in there run through NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, is EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program. It's wildly beloved by farmers and ranchers because it's just grant funding for farmers to do and ranchers to do things that they were already going to do, but they just get a little extra technical support and funding for it. Wolf deterrents are in EQIP, but for states like the Dakotas, Montana, and Idaho, we're just not in it because we've never had a gray wolf population.
What's a wolf deterrent? Like rock music?
Yeah, exactly.
Random stuff
No,
like
seriously, like range riders, noise, they have like smoke guns.
Yeah.
Because once a wolf pack gets the taste of beef, they don't go back.
Yeah.
And so then once a wolf pack will get that taste, you have to depredate, you have to eliminate that entire pack.
Right.
And so the key is getting it before that happens, which happens from deterrence. And so those are two like federal levers that I could press and things that I could do to support.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that they should still be on the Endangered Species Act, like federally protected?
Man, I don't know. It's such a balance of like getting. Like we would love these wolves to be on our national forest land, right, and not on our cattle ranches, but you can't tell a wolf like where the boundary is, right? And so we can say like this is a win for conservation. Like we brought these animals back from like the brink, but we brought them now to a point where they're actively harming our local economy and our local ranchers, and so. I think for me, really staying focused on the question of what can I do, and what can I do within hopefully my first term in Congress, is those two things. And then, continue to learn more and bring the people who know more about it, get the wildlife biologists, get the ranchers, get the Forest Service, get everybody at the table to talk about more like systemic-wide solutions. And that's like part of the way that I want to lead is, I'm a learner. Background in education, like I love learning. Obviously, I'm a nerd, but I also know, especially with my work at food banks, like the best policy solutions come from the people closest to the problem. And so in food insecurity, like we try not to make policy solutions or answers for people without them at the table, without saying like, what does it actually look like? What are your actual barriers to food insecurity? And I want to bring that into how I'll lead because like I don't have all of the context, right? I don't know all of the answers, but I can have a working group on wolves that has all of those people at the table, right? I can have a working group on rural education that has people from, rural Mendocino County and Lassen County and has educators and parents and students all at the table and saying, what are our policy priorities for our region in this area? We can do one for rural healthcare. And so I'm really serious about having a district heavy focused staff that can do some of the casework and constituent services, but also can really run these working groups to be able to solve small problems and make way for bigger system change that'll benefit our part of the world. So.
Okay. So
man, you just get me talking, and you'll never get me to shut up.
We have so many things we could cover, but I can't not ask you the most basic question of all, which is, right, we had Prop 50, we had redistricting, and so a lot of people who are used to living in, like you said, a ruby red district, all of a sudden I think they feel like, well, it's going to be all the Bay Area people who, they get to pick whoever represents us, and that, say you won, that you wouldn't represent the needs of rural California. You focus more on, like, why should people who always vote Republican vote for you?
Yeah, I hope by this point in the interview, people who think that way will have heard from my experience and my credibility that I've always lived in rural California. I will always show up for rural California. I moved to Chico to go to Chico State. I got my bachelor's and my master's in agriculture from Chico State. I taught ag at Chico State. Like, I've worked for food banks and nonprofits. Like, I am ag industry groups. Like, I am a rural Northern California person, and I'm started fighting this particular fight in 2018, and I'm still fighting it because the people here and the communities here matter to me, right? And so I hope at this point I've demonstrated that, but I also want to lead in such a way, and I feel like I've demonstrated this credibly, that I want to bring all the voices to the table, right? And I want to hear and listen and understand credibly what Republicans think, what no party preference voters think, what Democrats think, what teachers think, what firefighters think, what state government thinks, what local government thinks. And after hearing all of those opinions, like, my guiding light is like, will this make life better for working families in Northern California? Or will it not? And like, that at the end of the day is the decision maker. And there is a lot of nuance in how we do that and how we can create multi-benefit scenarios for different stakeholders. But at the end of the day, it's like, my job is to make life better for rural working families. And that is that's what I'm gonna do, and that's who I am. So does that answer the question? Did we get there?
It does.
And go back if I missed a part.
It's like, it sounds really good,
Yeah.
right? And I don't have a political party that I ascribe to, and so this all sounds good to me. There are going to be some voters out there who say, oh, she's going to say that, but it's just more spending.
Yeah.
And, I don't really know what it is about Northern California specifically, why, especially in more agricultural places or more rural places, why it's a more conservative leaning. But I'm trying to think of some of the big concerns. Like, I know that right now a big topic is border security. The entrance of fentanyl into our country, and it seems like that's somehow a political, partisan thing. I'm not sure why. What is your take on that?
I'm not sure why either. So I have a take. No one's surprised. So for the year after I graduated from Chico State, I moved to El Salvador, and so I lived in rural eastern El Salvador for a year, and I was volunteering with a human rights organization called Cristasol. I later then spent 6 years on the board of that organization. I'm currently actually the 25th anniversary committee chairperson for the organization, but it is and has been a leading organization in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And what they do is they fight for victims of state violence, of gang violence, victims of forced displacement by violence, and they both help individual cases, but then they take action judicially, and they fight for reform in those governments, so those governments are actually working to do the system change to take care of their own people. And so the angle that I'm always going to bring to this conversation is, why are people coming in the first place? Like, what are the drivers of migration? What are the root causes of migration that are bringing people here? Broadly thinking, we all think, oh, it's economic opportunity. That is one reason. Other reasons are that we see consistently in our research is fear of violence, and that's from the state, so from their government, from gangs, the fear of impunity of those gangs, and also increasingly, especially in Guatemala, climactic changes are like flooding, small farmers, like flooding, mudslides, just completely taking out their land from climate change, and then they're actually becoming climate migrants, and we'll increasingly see that. And so looking at the root causes and saying, okay, this is why people are coming, and then recognizing that people have a right to asylum, and that is both in US law and international law. And the Trump administration has attacked the right to asylum so specifically that they've defunded courts, they've removed judges, they've made it harder and harder and harder for people to seek that right and seek coming into this country in an asylum case legally. So I think that's one thing that I would offer and bring to the table is like, if we're going to call it a crisis, let's understand why it's a crisis, and then if you'll permit me for just a moment, if we will look at the United States' complicity in that crisis based on our foreign interventions over the last 50 years in Latin America. And I think foreign interventions in Latin America is a timely topic to also talk about this week with what's happening in Venezuela. But if we look at how in the Reagan era, just going back to El Salvador, in the Reagan era, between 1980 and 1991, the US spent $1 million a day to fund the Salvadoran government in a brutal civil war against their citizens, because one of the 5 conglomerates that formed the guerrilla was the Salvadoran Communist Party. And so in that anti-communist run, we were funding $1 million a day to a war that killed 70,000 civilians, brutally murdered 4 U.S. Catholic church women. Like, the human rights abuses are not appropriate for this podcast, but like the largest massacre in Latin American history, funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars. And so I think like whenever, and I'm all, like, now you know me well enough to say, okay, I'm always going to look bigger, and I'm going to look at the reason things are happening. And if the reason things are happening, we've created this crisis on our border because of foreign interventions in Latin America, and not addressing root causes. And so then for me, the answer is, well then what is our duty to stop, to help ease that harm? And that looks like, for me, an immigration system that does not send masked agents into our communities to gun down innocent civilians, American citizens or not. It doesn't mean rounding up people that we think are not here legally and putting them into detention camps. What it looks like is a humane law-abiding policy where we can make sure that people who want jobs and want economic opportunity have that. Like, we need that economic support. And so that's the short answer. That's a short answer. We'll have a whole nother podcast about Latin American history if you want.
Okay, Audrey, we're going to wrap it up right now. In honor
No, it's been 45 minutes. We haven't talked about healthcare or education.
We'll have to have a part 2.
We'll have a part 2.
Real quick, in honor of Chief Meteorologist Howie Gordon, who's been patiently standing by, I have to know, with your studies in forest management and forest health, have you ever seen evidence of a Bigfoot out there?
I have not even once.
Not yet.
Not yet, but if Howie tells me, I will look at it.
Okay. We'll let you guys talk afterwards.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This was so fun.
Yep. We'll check back in again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening today. I decided to offer this podcast after enough of you let me know that you wanted a deeper dive into certain stories than you get on our TV broadcasts. We elect certain people to represent our voice, but who are they really? My hope is that this podcast answers that question. I love your feedback, and I want to know who you'd like to hear from next. Just fill out that comment section and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify.